and they kind of start trying to take you over that way. And lots of schizophrenics fight with that. I mean, they don't know what they are. It's like they think it might be them, it might not be them. And here's the psychiatric mafia comes in and goes, "Oh yeah, your brain is broken. It's you. Something's wrong with you. All you can do is take these toxic meds that we have for you. Expensive toxic meds. There's nothing else you can do."
Last time we spoke to you guys, we did get a lot of positive feedback of people making people who were hearing voice, making them realise that it wasn't them. I can't remember them in detail, but we got quite a lot of comments saying that, "Oh, thank God for this," Yeah,
they have to. They have to realize it's not them. Otherwise, they think they're fighting themselves, and you can't fight yourself.
It's like an autoimmune disease of the mind.
Yes.
That's what they convince you it is. Where you actually want to destroy yourself. It's a strange feeling. I know. Sorry, Sherry.
That's okay.
The men have taken over.
That's okay.
Tell us to shut up.
Hey, so the thing that the people that are telling the patients your brain is broken, you need to take these drugs, they're the gatekeepers. Okay, they're working for those guys whether they know it or not.
Yeah,
they're really working for those guys. They have no sense of other presence, because they think about the body as a mechanical thing. It's just a bunch of chemicals and electrical impulses, and there's nothing. It's really kind of a machine. That's the way they look at us. And until they start looking at us as spiritual beings and then realize our visual spectrum, our physical visual spectrum is so tiny. I mean, like it's 99.99999% is invisible, right? So the amount of physical stuff that we're dealing with, which seems like everything, right? But that's not true. So if they could see that much, they would change their minds. It might take them a little bit, because I know what Jerry went through to realize that these really are entities. They really are.
Yeah, they brainwash you. I came out of graduate school going, "Oh yeah, this is a chemical brain imbalance, and these medicines somehow fix it." And then I'm watching the psychiatrist at this big state hospital I worked at for 7 years, and what I saw them do is they bring the patient in. They go, "Are you hearing voices?" And the guy says, "Yeah," and then they just go, "Okay, we're going to start you on this medicine." And that happened over and over and over again. I'm going, "Where's the baseline? Okay, if there's a chemical brain imbalance, where's the tests that tell us what's out of balance or by how much?"
So my father did 3 tours in the Vietnam War. And in his second tour, he was advanced enough in rank, and he was there, I think, 11 or 12 months. And when he was in country at that point, he's always been a field officer, and came up in the military through the Korean War and a battlefield commission. And so, the military likes guys like him, and they let him be in charge of a couple of different projects. One of the projects that he was in charge of at the time was this technology that they introduced into Vietnam that almost brought the war to a standstill. Wow. And this technology was a night vision goggle. But it's not night vision as we have it now, okay? Because the night vision goggle was done in the red spectrum. And so when my father came back from Vietnam...
You mean infrared or...
No. I'll explain.
Ordinary red.
Oh, ordinary red. Okay. So instead of seeing... When you look at a night vision goggles now, you see green. Everything is translated into green for you. And human eye sees green, more colors, shades of green than any other color. It's part of our evolution, our need to find food.
So that's clever then.
Correct. But see, here's the thing. It started off as red. And so the night vision goggles were introduced to helicopter pilots and gunnery people in Vietnam. And I won't hesitate as to I won't guess as to which year it was that they introduced them, but my father was part of this initial experiment with the troops that he commanded. And it was a disaster because the image was presented in red pixels, not green. And because of the technology being used at that time, it created very interesting effects that they could not deal with. So you had some officers that were part of this cadre or this cohort of other officers that were all testing these new technologies for the military that had their troops always use these goggles. And those units became self-destructive. They went down in a horrid situation. My father was extremely practical, didn't want to see himself get destroyed in any way, wanted to return and get out. So as soon as he saw what was going on with these goggles, he had his people take them off. And he actually got praise from the military for the way that he dealt with all of this. But the effect was this. A gunner in a helicopter would have no problem using these goggles. And only everything is showing up as a sort of a faint reddish image. And it was true night vision the way we have it now. And even a greater depth, because you could also flip it and get an extra layer that was sort of yellowish that would be heat signatures as well. And they don't have those combined anymore in these goggles. Anyway, the goggles that were presented to the gunners, and my father tells the story of the very first time they're out with them, and they're flying along, and he's in the front of the helicopter with the pilot. And all of a sudden, in a very peaceful area, not anything going on at all, the gunner in his on the starboard side of his helicopter starts firing wildly at their height, not at anything on the ground, but in an area that he was shooting at, and basically causing other helicopters in their little flotilla to have to react. And my father goes on back to the gunner, basically demanding, "What the hell, dude? What are you shooting at?" And the kid is just sweating profusely, and his eyes are just dilated beyond belief. And my dad thought he was dealing with another heroin addict, but this was before it had gotten really bad in Vietnam, and the kid was not exhibiting those kind of symptoms. He was reacting to what he had seen. And he's describing to my father that he was shooting at these basically flying demons that were flying alongside the helicopter. And he knew they were coming to get him because they were gesturing at him and they could see him. And so he reacted and he started shooting his Bren gun, big 50 caliber slugs at these things, right? And they were flying along right next to the helicopter. So he's firing out directly from the helicopter, and there are other helicopters in the vicinity. So it caused all kinds of problems. And this goes on repeatedly, week after week after week. Every time they try and use these night vision goggles, at some point they encounter monsters, true monsters. Now, officers had been told not to wear these. Okay, the pilots were told not to wear them. But my dad put them on to see what the hell was going on, and to hear him describe it, it was like being in the worst kind of a demonic gothic hell.
Jeez.
That you'd look out at the tops of trees and you'd see these creatures with big wings and claws and everything come flying off of the tops of the trees. But you take the goggles off and there's not even a disturbance in the fog above the canopy of the trees, right?
They're perceiving into an aspect of consciousness.
Correct.
Another dimension.
And it was tied to the red image. And so as soon as they went to green, all of this kind of stuff disappeared.
Of course.
MK Ultra is trauma-based mind control programming. And, with me, they used, as a newborn baby, they used electricity to, as one, I'm not sure what all they did with me, but, that's one thing that I do know they did to traumatize me. And that's mostly to split your mind and have, this is where people get alters. And when I was in school or shortly thereafter, they talked about Sybil. And Sybil was somebody that had multiple personalities, and it was, quite news breaking and astounding and all of that. Well, talk to, any MK Ultra project monarch about it, and they'll tell you the different personalities that they've given names to.
Professional success and everything about me, I still have to stop and find my way from one to the other, where they should, in a normal person, they should be integrated. You shouldn't. I talk about Russia and forget that I ever am a physician. I just did it right there, and so I'm looking forward to. I haven't been ready in the past to speak to other people who've been through this, but I'm getting there, and I can see that with these the documents that came out December 24th, 2024. So that's the first confession, the first realization, the first acknowledgement that MK Ultra existed, that it was funded by the government, that it was supported by the government, that it was run in safe houses and schools and universities all across this country, also in Mexico, Canada, and in other places. So it's only been 4 months that I've had this acknowledgement that I didn't make all this up, and it's made it. It's very raw and very fresh for me, and I'm sure those of you who are somewhere else, at some point on this this journey to healing, will find themselves at places in here. All these documents have been unredacted for the first time. Kathy O'Brien had a lot of them, and you could get them on a CD from her for years, but they were completely redacted. It still helped because it acknowledged that these things had gone on. It just didn't say anything about them. But here they are, unredacted. Plus, they include little memos to each other and cute little notes between. There's one awful little handwritten memorandum that they were killing too many American children, and that was going to cause them trouble someday. And so they made the decision to start bringing in foreign children. And it wasn't that they were going to change anything, but then foreign children could never sue them under the Bill of Rights because they didn't have any rights as far as these people are concerned. And I think that's when you started to see I know it was when you started to see large numbers of foreign children being brought into the Saturnalias and the sessions like this, that we would have on the beaches in Mexico, and they called them all Mexican, and they still do that. So these children came from all over the world, and like those 300,000 children that we know the State Department brought over the border under the Biden administration and called Mexican children, they're from all over the world. But somehow, in the minds of the MK Ultra organizers, they considered Mexican a derogatory term, and that it would make people less apt to care, which I think is just symptomatic of the whole sick mess. And that it probably boiled down to 12 people who were given such extraordinary power, and then the sort of the army of their army, their action arm were the Nazis, who they brought over from Nuremberg, who were not killed in Nuremberg. Instead, they were brought to the United States and turned loose. And they did it on their own children. My family did this. So my grandfather and my 5 uncles were in Nuremberg, and they brought scientists back to the United States, gave them new identities, and then put their eldest children in the programs, which is how I got in there. So I'm just talking away.
Thank you. It's so wonderful that we have those documents, and I link them on Juliet's first episode. And if you're here for part 2, or if you're new and didn't see them or recognize them last time or know where they were, they're going to be in the show notes once again. So I really appreciate you, Juliet, shining a light on that, and what validation for you and for others that finally you're getting admittance. It might not be the full story. Every single document that ever existed might not be in there, but just to have it said that yes, this happened, and all these people that were suspected, like Sidney Gottlieb and some of the others that you went over, that have been testified dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of times by survivors who have seen the same people, that has to just be such a breath of relief that, to know for sure that no, you're not crazy, this really did happen. And, not that you ever doubted that you were after having all these memories come through, but it can be really hard when people don't have that corroboration to just have that in the back of your head that, well, maybe I am making this up, and it's just nice to have something concrete finally given to us that can speak some truth into this and can help validate and confirm that, these testimonies are true and our government did do this. And, unfortunately, I'm hard pressed to think that they have ever stopped, and, it's probably going on stronger than ever now.
Oh, yeah. Certainly.
Yep.
Is what is MK Ultra and what is trauma-based mind control to begin with? Because there's a lot of folks, maybe this is the first time you've seen a video such as this, and you don't understand what trauma-based mind control is, or the CIA's MK Ultra projects. And so I want to take a moment to explain that. Now, with that said, Emma and I may use things that are triggers, and some of the content of this conversation may contain triggers, and I would not want to trigger anyone who is not consciously aware of who they are and what they've been through and what they've been programmed with. And so I want to put that warning out there. If you feel like you are a survivor of the project, then you need to do some healing and some research before you listen to this conversation. So the trauma-based mind control project that the CIA is running, a lot of people have heard about MK Ultra, Monarch, Project Monarch, these various projects, but when they research it, they come up with lots of things that tell them about the drug testing, things of that nature. And drugs are a big part of it. They feed you a ton of drugs in the project. But by the time that I came along, the drugs, a lot of the research had been done, and they knew and had formulated and synthesized several drugs that they would use with me, drugs that could put you to sleep or make you angry or make you feel invincible, wake you up, and they would mix them. And so drugs are a big part of that. But the key to trauma-based mind control is trauma and disassociation. That's why it's called trauma-based mind control, because they use trauma to cause you to disassociate and create in you what is called a multiple personality disorder. And this is what I prefer to call a multiple personality disorder and compared to a dissociative identity disorder, because they create multiple personalities within you. Yes, it is a dissociative identity disorder, but they're creating multiple personalities within you so that they can use you for various things. and you can go about your daily life living as a normal individual in society, and no one would suspect who you are. So it begins with trauma. They traumatize you from the time that you're born. And the most horrid kind of trauma to inflict on a child is sexual abuse by their family. So I was abused by my family, by my father, by my grandfather, by my uncle, various other individuals from the time that I was born. As far back as I can remember sexual abuse in our family. And this is generational. I come from a satanic generational incestual bloodline. And so it's been going on in my family for a very long time. And those are the strongest children to disassociate, is my understanding, are children from satanic bloodlines who have, their family has a history of incestual abuse. And so they take these children. It's an interesting dynamic, Emma, because there are various family bloodlines and children who've been abused that are collected into the project. And not all children that have been abused and are in satanic bloodlines are necessarily going to be pulled into the project. They may go through trauma-based mind control programming and satanic ritual abuse, but they may not be owned by the CIA. I was owned, literally owned as a slave by the Central Intelligence Agency, called a mind slave. That's how they could use me for various things. I have to get a drink of water. I'm sorry, Emma.
You have nothing to be sorry for. Take water anytime you need.
Nice, thank you. Yeah. So, trauma-based mind control, they find kids, they find bloodlines, they do genealogical searches for these people, they seek them out and they find them. And sometimes that family keeps their family in the project, such as my family. My grandfather was involved with the CIA for as far back as I know. And my uncle, I don't know when he got involved with the CIA, probably after he was done with the Marines. But they find these children and they test them for their ability to disassociate. So the satanic families and the pedophiles that are abusing these children, they are grooming them for future use potential as mind slaves. And so I was tested when I was 6 years old, or 5 years old. We talked about that in our last meeting. And I was sponsored by the Central Intelligence Agency to go through trauma-based mind control programming. And that programming took place at Disneyland. And so trauma-based mind control is being practiced all over the place. And back to, I'm sorry, I'm getting distracted. I'll stay focused. So MK Ultra, they're seeking out these children. And then they are putting them into the project. And then they are raised under a very scientifically formulated process designed by the CIA. The CIA didn't invent it. They're not the first ones to start doing this. Satanic families have been doing it for a long time, and Satanists. And so it's nothing new, but the CIA has enhanced it greatly to a scientific process. And you're raised to be subjected to mind control programming in various places as a child and as you're growing. And so I was taken a lot to Disneyland, and there's a lot of mind control programming that happens at the Disneyland facility. And I was taken there several years in a row. We would go for a week at a time, once a year. Now, there's a couple years I believe we didn't go. I'm not sure what years those were yet. But so they find these children, they abuse them, and you're put through horrible things in the project. They're trying to break your mind. They're trying to split your mind and take you to a point where those personalities are flawless, and they do awful things, Emma. They make you watch children be murdered in front of you. That happened several times while I was in Disneyland. I wrote about an experience of that in Disneyland 1984 that people can read on my website. And there are other experiences that I had down there of watching other children die, and it could be random and it could be planned out. And then in Disneyland, the programming included pornography. You were made to be in child pornography, this weird porn that was theme-based, and they would have various people dressed up, children made to come there and watch this porn being filmed, dressed up in costumes. So they would be brought in and they would be in costumes. And it was always theme-based. And these costumes varied. Sometimes it was Sesame Street themed, and sometimes it was NASA themed and alien themed. And so it varied in the theme of it. And so you were traumatized in that way through the project. You were also traumatized. It's very satanic, all of it. It's very satanic. You were traumatized by making you drink blood. They'd kill people and make you consume their blood. And they would also make you eat human flesh as well, which was really disgusting and awful. But those are the kinds of things that they do in the project. They also make you abuse each other. I went through programming with my cousin and my little brother. My little brother was also selected for the project, and my younger cousin. And so the CIA sponsors this abuse. And then when you reach a certain age where you are now well programmed enough, you have reached a certain point, a certain level of existence in the project, they will purchase you as from your parents or from your guardian or whoever that individual is. And I was purchased from my parents when I was 15 by Senator Robert Byrd. He was a real scumbag. I knew him. I remember meeting him when I was 6, the first time I was in Disneyland. And he was a very bad person. But they would then purchase you. And this purchase would be made, in my case, it was made through a government contract to my parents through the local school district. My father owned a computer store, and he got a large government contract through the local school district, something to do with their computer systems. And that's how I was paid for by the government and by Byrd. And so what MK Ultra is about is finding children from satanic and dissociative families, ancestral families, and then traumatizing them, programming them. This programming also involves things like deprivation tanks. These were designed by Dr. John C. Lilly. I met Lilly. He was one of the doctors in charge of my programming. I knew him as John, and he was interesting, an interesting fellow, but he was funded by our government for his research. And I was one of his projects, this Dr. John C. Lilly. And so they have various doctors involved as well. Lots of people are involved. And so they take these children, they put them through this programming, and then they purchase them and they use them. The programming is supposed to never end. You're supposed to be getting updates. You're supposed to be, your abuse is supposed to continue. When I was older, but I hadn't remembered these things yet, this was before 2017, I can remember, for example, being with my father on a camping trip, and him in the middle of the night, we were sleeping together because we were
finding out about MK Ultra. It's for the longest time you never even heard about that. Most people, the normies, well, they haven't gotten it because the mainstream media doesn't talk about it. But everybody else is, the alternative news, it's starting to creep in, that is what's going on with the vaccination and the whole setup of what the United States and the world is up to right now. We're having the wool pulled over our eyes, and that's mind control.
100%, and I have been such an advocate for listening to these stories, because once I started this podcast, I realized your voices, from what you've personally gone through and the truth aspect of it being an authentic story, pulls the wool off of our eyes. I've been advocating, everyone, you got to listen to survivors. Turn off your TV. They're the ones that know the who's, what's, when's, where's, why's of all the questions that we have of the world. And I love your analogy of a puzzle too, because I think coming from such horrific things, it's so disempowering to a survivor to feel important and to feel like they have any worth. That's been taken away from them. All their innocence has been taken away. And so it's a really powerful reminder that, no, you're a part of discovering something that is ancient, thousands of years old, and exposing it to people so we can stop it once and for all. So children of the future can have a better future finally, and not be born into these horrific cycles that have perpetuated over time, So I love that you encourage that, because I think it lights a spark in people who might feel just consumed by darkness. It's like you're holding up the candle and being like, no, it's actually light, come follow me, and we can all put our candles together and light the world up and share all of this. So I really love that. And I'm so grateful and happy that you did decide to speak out, because you have a really amazing story that I know people listening, including myself, are going to get a lot of value from. So,
who started it, and he was basically in charge of opening safe houses across the United States and procuring large quantities of LSD, which they obtained from Eli Lilly in Switzerland through the Dulles brothers' connections. They spent World War II in Switzerland, had deep contacts with Eli Lilly. Eli Lilly produced the deadly Zyklon gas that was used in Germany, but they also produced LSD, and eventually they produced Prozac. So out of all this mind control eventually came the massive mind control of America using Prozac. But they obtained LSD from Eli Lilly in tons, and it's described in here. And Sidney Gottlieb, who was in charge of Project Monarch, he's the first picture there, was head of technical services for the CIA at the time that he was appointed to run Project Monarch. And he was known as the head poisoner of the CIA. And he was in charge of developing bioweapons. And his area of research was mRNA. And if you're familiar with COVID vaccine at all, you know that that's an mRNA supposed vaccine. And they determined at that time that mRNA's only use was as a bioweapon and something that would permanently alter DNA and could be used for genocide. And so, I mean, I heard this as a child. I knew this as a child. I knew about the genocide agenda. I knew, and every time I would have a session, a training session, it would get walled off. And that was the building of the dissociative identity. They call it a disorder, but it's the way they made us children who were under so much torture and threat all the time develop psychologically so that we could develop. I mean, if you couldn't remember, if you couldn't forget each one of these traumatic experiences, you would be living in a state of permanent PTSD, which is what happens when you start to remember in any kind of therapy. If you start breaking down those walls too fast, or like I did, I tried to do them all at once and it just everything came flooding. Now, the most popular drug in the United States is Prozac. And Prozac is produced by Eli Lilly and it comes right out of this. So the last thing you want to take is something like Prozac, which represses your ability to process the memories. What it does is it separates your conscious core from the memories so that you are working at that level. You're in your memories and you're acting on your triggers. And what Prozac does is separates so you don't know how you feel about that, acting out or however you're behaving or seemingly depressed or locked into television, unable to escape the constant bombardment of subliminal programming, which is coming at you. And I'm quite sure that's deliberate. And Eli Lilly makes billions of dollars off of this. So, therapists should not take MK Ultra victims that come to see them and put them on Prozac. That's
not any
worst
drug.
Thing. Not any drug.
No, they don't need it because we're so resilient. We got this capacity to heal that we've been blessed with, and we can all do it. You and I did. My gosh, anybody can. I mean,
I never took any drugs.
No way, me either. It's not gonna help. If people are drugged and taken away from their ability to heal from within, then programming will start manifesting in physical ways, and then the person gets sicker and sicker and sicker, and that there's many physical ways that the program can manifest. It's like the mind is screaming, let me heal, open these neuron pathways. And if we're not doing that, if we're not responding and starting that healing process, then it activates a physical response. It could be digestive. It could be which is a very common one. It could be that a person isn't sleeping well. It could be any number of things, aches and pains.
Yes, fibromyalgia. There's a big one.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it does, because it's like the body is saying, well, I was hurt and you're not paying attention. So it kind of tries to like remanifest it in order to get your attention, to pay it, to heal from what had happened instead of being removed from it. So, big pharma, the drugs, it creates a landslide of money for them, because they're dumbing down the ability to heal from the trauma, which in turn causes the body to manifest, and then they treat that. It's just a bad cycle, and it's not one that any of us need. We have such a capacity for healing. Look at military special forces. They can take a bullet and keep on going because they have that no time to bleed programming in there. Our brains are so powerful over our bodies. And if they can do that based on a program, imagine what we can do by driving our mind-brain function over our body ourselves by our own choice for health, instead of according to someone else's agenda. Instead, we have this ability to even regulate our own blood flow. Then, if they can do it with MK Ultra mind control programming, it means our brain is capable of doing that, which we can learn from and drive ourselves. If we drive it ourselves, we can use it for healing and health. So as I was deprogramming these aspects that had been programmed into me, I took control of that because I deprogrammed the program first. So instead of having a death program kick in that had to do with the heart or with respiratory, either of those can be overcome by driving it from within. And if we can drive that from within, we can use that for our own health and well-being all the way through going forward. So we have this amazing capacity. We don't need drugs to take us further away from it. We're just regaining what we've been blessed with all along because we're overcoming what was imposed on us. Again, what happens to us is who we are. Who we are is still within. And who we are, whoa, we have amazing, amazing healing capacities.
When a mind is split, and it's all about the will. At the end of the day, everything that is dealing with abuse and trauma and DID is about an imposition of someone else's will on your will. And so demons fundamentally are the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim. We've talked about that a little bit earlier. They don't have a corporate body in this realm to be able to engage with their lusts. Okay. They are always hungry and never able to be satisfied. They're always thirsty and never able to drink. They can't physically enact their desires and their wills with their own bodies anymore because they're bound in between the spirit realm and the earth realm. And so they're stuck here. It's like a prison planet for them, y'all. Because of that, they're looking for skin suits. They're looking for human agents to be able to occupy, to engage in these activities, to enact their lusts. That imposition of their will on mankind is what drives so much of this dark agenda, because they want physically to enact the will of that ancient hate upon the hands of men. They want to raise up an army. At the end of the day, that's their fundamental deep desires, to raise up an army that is going to wage a war against the Son of Righteousness. That's where it all is driving to. Is Revelation 19 is like the Son of Man coming back, that white rider on the white horse, when all the earth's armies are gathered to wage war on him. He literally has to build that army early on. And so the shattering of the mind, the deliberate destruction of someone's free will, is fundamental basis to all DID. You have literally a gift from your creator to help you to survive impossible things. No one should have to experience trauma and abuse, ongoing destabilization. No one. But we have a gift that allows us to dissociate it, separate ourselves from that. But when you do that and you create a fresh personality or blank slate, when you have that and you have a sexual trauma, abuse, rape that's taking place during the course of that event, there is a spiritually transmitted disease that is so often brought in, intentionally invoked. Like you have somebody who is trained in that to bring in a spirit to enforce the programming, to hold captive that individual. Like people, a lot of times, I had a survivor share a story of that recently, who I did an interview with, and like that they had a door in their mind for like throughout their life, that they just, this horrible black door, and every time they thought about it, they were like almost sick and they could not get through it. And it was years and years of seeking intimacy with the Father and a relationship with him, and like developing maturity before they were able to actually look at the door with the Messiah with them and realize at the end of the day, it was like the door was literally a demon. The door was a demon that was keeping them from seeing this memory. That was put there by design, but during the course of the abuse. That demon is there to try to keep the person from coming to the truth. That demon is there to try to hold the trauma in place. They want to hold that trauma in. If you have the spirits that attach to the person, it allows them to be able to control them and hold them in that bondage for a lot longer. It's horrible. And it keeps them from coming to the place of freedom, because they hit this wall of resistance, this internal tremor, like that doesn't want to get out. And so like there is a major component that requires strategic, deliberate deliverance. Okay. Like it requires expelling that demon. It requires expelling that stronghold, a strong man that's inside them, binding it and casting it out of them, to give them freedom, to give them restoration. Because otherwise you don't know sometimes if you're dealing with a personality or are you dealing with a demon, and it's sometimes very messy, and it requires discernment. There is a chapter in here that I wanted to read from. This is on page 2:26, it kind of captures just the fundamental basis of it. In Ephesians 2, it says, "And you were dead in your trespasses and sins, in which you formerly walked according to the age of this world, and according to the prince of the power of the air, the spirit who now works in the sons of disobedience. Among them we also once lived in the lusts of our flesh, doing the desires of the flesh and of the mind, and were by nature children of wrath, even as the rest. But Jesus came to destroy the works of the devil," 1 John 3:8, "and that includes his power and ownership of you. Look at Colossians 1:10 and see that you were once under the rule or dominion of Satan, but you have been taken out of that and been transferred into the rule, power, and protection of the kingdom of Christ. You are now a child of light." And Ephesians 5 gives you a great unveiling of it. Read Ephesians 5 and see that you are now in Christ and a child of light, God's light. And because of that, you are now commanded to expose the evil deeds of darkness. Here's part of the goal of your salvation: Satan power expelled from you. And now as a believer in Jesus, it is our goal in evangelism for others. As in Acts 26, "I now send you to open their eyes and to turn them from darkness to light and from the power of Satan to God." True salvation is ground zero for expelling darkness, Satan's works, rights, and influences off, out, and over us. You are what you are now. This new life is detailed all in the New Testament as a relationship with God in Christ. To see what you are and have in Christ, you can do a quick reading of Ephesians 1, 2 Peter 1, and look at how often 2 Corinthians 5. It all begins to reveal this new life in Christ. "Therefore, if any man is Christ, he is a new creature. Old things have passed away. Look, all things have become new. All this is from God, who has reconciled us to himself through Jesus Christ." This fundamentally, it requires like a renewing of your identity. And even though like on your core, for a lot of people, even if your core identity is a strong believer, is already understanding of a lot of this stuff, or somebody that's not, you have to deal with expelling that darkness out of them in order for them to be able to enter in to a restoration of identity. And so that's why, like we've talked about before, I don't believe you can really get total deliverance without an identity restoration through the Messiah. Like, he is the judge of all the earth that has the authority to actually drive out these spirits that are far more powerful and smarter than any of us. Like, don't ever think that these immortals can't smoke you psychologically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically. These things can tear you to pieces, y'all. And they are very, very good at doing all kinds of stuff to make you terrified. So like when you're dealing with survivors, when you're dealing with people that are another personality comes forward, sometimes this demonic horde comes forward with them. And it's absolutely destabilizing. It's very scary if you've never dealt with that stuff. If you don't have any experience in spiritual warfare, you better stick and learn it really quick, because if you want to enter into this field, you're going to be fundamentally interlocked. Like, people that are being physically and sexually abused get transference of horrible demonic strongholds that come into their life, and you've got to be able to engage that stuff and deal with that stuff, because they need healing. They need restoration of their identity. And so once you can drive out that demonic, you got to give them a restoration of their identity, their purpose, because so much of that imprinting is just, I'm a guardian, I'm a runner, I'm a sex slave. Like, that's all I am. That's all I'm ever going to be. And so you have to restore to them a new purpose, a new identity. Like, you have to literally help them understand something so fundamental, that that's not all you were made for. That's not all you were here for. So you have to eradicate those lies. You have to eradicate that deceit, and you have to bring them restoration of the truth, bring them restoration of a new purpose.
Great answer. That was a really good question too. It's fascinating learning all about this. And let's go back to familiar spirits, which essentially are, spirits of dead people. I'd love to hear any insights you have on that. The person that had wrote the question said that she had experienced paranormal experiences as a child that felt very demonic in that way. And she was inquiring about the familiar spirits and maybe just some advice on how to, rid your life of those also.
You said familiar spirits. I'll just say two things. First off, familiar spirits aren't necessarily just like, you can have dead ancestor familiar spirit side of it, but like, I would look at familiar spirits more from a lens of like generational curses, generational spirits that have been like the guardian over the family demonically or spiritually, like principality over the family. Like, my family's principality over them is death. Like that's literally the familiar spirit that my family operates under. That's the inherited, the multi-generational God they serve is death. So like that's where their covens are. That's who they're like, that's their boss. So on one side of it, that you're gonna have an overarching like family spirit that's gonna rule and govern over your family and direct you generationally. You'll see there's a stronghold of alcoholism. People will say they're like, there's some kind of genetic problem. It's not a genetic thing, y'all. Like these are literally family spirits that come on and are passed down. Like why there's incest going generationally is because that's literally one of the family spirits that is passed down. So on one side you can be dealing with, yes, spirits of dead ancestors are one thing that you can look at, but I generally think that most people are actually dealing with is not that. They're dealing with their actual family's generational spirit. That's like the one that's been on their bloodline for a long time. And I'm a huge advocate of people breaking and renouncing their curses of generational curses of Freemasonry and of breaking of any of these oaths that families swear, because part of that is here, I'm sharing another website. Hold on. This is
became more and more defiant and would refuse to cooperate. This went on till age 7. After we did the viewing, we had to drink a cup of medicine and take a nap on a mat. When I woke up, there was only a couple hours of school left. This had taken most of the day. I was always troubled afterwards because my private parts hit to sit at my desk on a hard wooden chair. After age 7, I stopped going to the Stargate classes and was taken to what was called the lab. My school campus had an elementary school on one side and a middle school on the other, and both schools were connected by an underground tunnel. Halfway through the tunnel was a blast-proof steel and concrete door that had to be opened by a pulley system because it was so heavy. Inside was a bright white room. On one side of the room, they had pelvic exam tables with stirrups lined up against one wall. Next to each table was a large machine that was regulated by dials and buttons that would deliver electric shocks. This is hard to talk about, sorry. There was a device that was a rectal probe. There was a vaginal speculum device. There was a penile probe and a urethral probe for females. And there was a helmet. All of these devices were for the purpose of electric shocks. They would often do spinal taps and deliver shocks to the spinal cord and brain by threading a wire into the spinal columns. These spinal taps are part of the reason why my lumbar spine has degenerated to the point where I need surgery to fix it. A few times a year, a man would visit and speak briefly with some of us test subjects, as he called us. I remember one of the kids saying that he worked for the CIA. I looked up this man over the last year, 2024, when I remembered him. And he later became, after working for the CIA, became chairman of the Joint Chiefs. And knowing that, that was under President Clinton and President Bush, you can look up who that was. I was able to find a picture of him standing in our school cafeteria, but shortly after I wrote about him in a Facebook post and added the picture of him in our school cafeteria, I was remotely triggered by direct energy weapons to suicide. I took 3 bottles of 275 pills in each. The pills were a synthetic narcotic. 8 of them at once would have been deadly, and I swallowed over 700. I had no idea that I had saved them. I used to take them for my chronic pain. My insiders told me that when I stopped taking them, we were made to save them and hide them. This man's picture has since been wiped from the internet, and the people who remotely triggered me should have known better, that they would be unsuccessful. You see, my husband was a paramedic when we met, as I was. We worked together in the ER of a level 1 trauma center. My trainer did all the electric shocks and programming. She had been educated in this by Joseph Mengele. Another time I came in contact with his legacy. And she never stopped reminding us of her Nazi connections. My handler rescued me and comforted me and stroked my hair, and his attentions were completely chaste. So he took me on a field trip, and we drove to the largest hospital in the city and walked right in the front door. We went down an elevator to the basement and wound our way through the hallway to the morgue. Somehow I knew the man working in the morgue on a first-name basis, and I knew that they would tell parents their child had died, and then the child who had been drugged at first would be taken to the morgue, where the child would be revived and then taken down to the tunnels. We went through a small door at the back of the morgue, which led to a stairway that went down seemingly forever. At the bottom, the door opened to a large underground tunnel. The walls and ceiling were cement, but the floor was like a dirt road. My handler told me that I could walk all the way to Texas or California or New York, and someday soon I'd be able to go around the world. He said that some of the tunnels were big enough to drive a jet airplane through, but some places were so small you could get stuck. He said work on the tunnels was going on constantly, day and night. After that, there were many trips to the tunnels. I was being groomed to be in charge of something down there. Somehow, I have insiders in me that know the locations of all of the occult training facilities for government mind control training. Somehow I know where all the breeder buildings are in my city and all of the things going on underground. Just to give an example of some of the things that happen underground, are that there are submarine docks underground on the East Coast and in Arizona and Nevada and Canada. I wonder if anyone remembers that Ghislaine Maxwell had a submarine pilot's license. I'm sure that this is why. Family right under our feet are the most unholy, abominable things going on. And it's only the survivors that are brave enough, like Gray and Carrie and Nathan, who have the courage to speak about child breeding on a massive scale and underground shenanigans. I saw pregnant girls in cages. The cages were so small that the girls couldn't stand up, nor could they lie down flat except in a fetal position. But the breeders in cages had a big problem for the evil ones. The girls would die from poor nutrition, infection, and suicide. They would chew their arms to get to a big blood vessel so that they would bleed out. These girls are the daughters of the Rothschilds and their ilk who had been sold into breeder slavery. they hated me because I was free to walk around and be relatively free, but they didn't realize I was just as much a slave as them. Now, because the breeders die underground, they have huge caverns full of artificial wombs with babies in them. I know that is so hard to believe. But because of the way these babies are made, they have no soul. And because of this, they don't need to be held or cuddled. And they are only programmed to believe these soulless babies. I'm sorry, they are only programmed. They are not ever trained like I was. They didn't need to be tortured so that they would believe everything their handlers say. I believe these soulless babies in the Chimera underground will make up the evil army of the 200 million mentioned in the book of Revelation.
Can't even tell you what I went through to, like, the fear and trembling I had before God, like, oh God, please let this be true. Is this true? And I read the book. I had never read anything like it. This pastor had a chat room with lots of different persons that had MPD, and I guess word just spread. He did this for a number of years and helped these people. He said the best thing that I learned that I could say to these people is, I believe you. I'm sorry that happened to you. And the liberty that you feel when somebody finally says, I believe you. Now, does that mean that every single thing that I ever thought happened is true? No. It means that I believe what I'm telling you is the fact of what happened, but there's a lot that's been hidden from me. But I can tell you that this was the beginning, a start to understanding what it is that God made us with the ability to split so we wouldn't die under the trauma that we experienced, and to help us to go on towards healing. Multiples. One of the issues is that some of these psychologists do not believe in a spiritual realm, and therefore they don't believe that when a demon says its name and it's responding to the fact that you're calling out a demon to say its name, they just think it's an altar. So unfortunately, there's a lot lost in the translation there, and it can be very dangerous for the multiple. And it also robs them of their power. And I mean, I love Allison Miller, and I love the work she has done. She brought us so far. She brought us well beyond the inside family model. She was really understanding satanic ritual abuse, but she got to this place where she just couldn't get beyond it. And so she couldn't help these people. And the problem is that if you don't understand that, yeah, that could really be a demon that's talking to you, then you also don't understand the programming that went on, and that altar was programmed with a demon. And you also don't understand the nature of real satanic abuse. You don't realize this is real. It's spiritual, but you don't want to see it. Now, my heart fell when I watched her doing some kind of a conference. It's online. I watched her and I listened to her say that. And I prayed for her. I'm like, Lord, she's come so far, but she's fallen short. And it took a little while coach and I working on it. And we started realizing that I had programmed altars. So there were some instances where this had become evident. I just didn't understand what I was seeing. I was in Alaska and I was doing some medical training. And now all I had that I knew of was training decades before as a nurse's aide, which is the bottom rung, like changing bedpans, changing beds, bringing water, ice water, taking temperatures, blood pressures, respiration, doing a little bit of charting. That's all. It was no big deal. We didn't do stuff like sterile field, sutures, any of that. Well, I was going through this training. There was a doctor teaching us sterile field that day. And he's telling everybody to gown up and glove up without touching anything, whatever. You have to be able to do this without touching anything. Otherwise, you're not sterile. And I was all done, just standing there with my hands in the air, with my gloves on, my gown on, all this stuff. And everybody else was struggling. He said, "You've done this before." I said, "Yeah, but I don't remember where." My body had the memory of it, but I didn't know where I learned it. If I'd known at the time that I was a multiple, I never would have said that, because that would have been a dead giveaway. So,